In a small, struggling town in the Midwest, life was tough for most people. The streets were lined with houses that looked like they had seen better days. One of those houses belonged to a single mother raising 6 kids on her own. She worked 2 jobs just to put food on the table, but no matter how hard she tried, there never seemed to be enough money. Government aid helped sometimes, but it wasn't enough to keep the weight of poverty from pressing down on the family. One of her children, a young boy with bright eyes and a curious mind, grew up faster than he should have. From an early age, he learned to take care of himself because his mom was always busy trying to make ends meet. His father? Well, he didn't even know who his father was. All he knew was that the man had left before he was born, leaving behind only questions about why he wasn't around. School was supposed to be a safe place, a place where he could escape the struggles of home. But instead, it became another battlefield. He was smart, smarter than most kids his age, but he struggled in class. No one realized he had learning difficulties that made reading and writing feel like climbing a mountain. Teachers saw him as trouble, while classmates teased him for being different. Slowly, the frustration built up inside him. He started skipping school, hanging out with older kids who didn't judge him or ask too many questions. By the time he turned 14, he had already gotten into trouble a few times. Small things at first, stealing snacks from the corner store, tagging walls with spray paint. But then came the night that changed everything. It started innocently enough. He and a couple of friends decided to break into a convenience store, late at night. They thought it would be easy. Just grab some stuff and leave. But something went wrong. An alarm blared, and within minutes, police cars surrounded the building. When officers arrived, they found the boy hiding behind a shelf, shaking with fear. The next morning, he sat in a cold, sterile courtroom, staring at the floor. His hands were cuffed and his heart raced as he waited for the judge to speak. That's when he saw him. The man sitting high above everyone else, wearing a black robe and looking down at him with serious eyes. Something about the judge felt familiar, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Maybe it was the way the man studied him, like he was searching for something, or maybe it was the sadness in his expression, a sadness the boy recognized because he carried it himself. When it was time for him to speak, the boy stood up slowly, his voice trembling. "I didn't mean to hurt nobody," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I'm just trying to survive." The words hung in the air, heavy and raw. For a moment, the judge paused, his gaze locked onto the boy. Then, without saying anything, he picked up his gavel and slammed it down, announcing the sentence: juvenile detention until his 18th birthday. As the bailiff led him away, the boy glanced back at the judge one last time. There was something in the man's eyes. Guilt? Regret? Whatever it was, it stuck with the boy long after the doors of the courtroom closed behind him. Little did he know, that moment would set off a chain of events neither of them could have predicted. This expanded version stays true to your request by keeping the tone natural and engaging. It avoids complex language and focuses on making the story relatable and human-centric. Let me know if you'd like me to continue expanding the other parts. The judge sat in his chambers after the hearing, staring blankly at the stack of files on his desk. His mind kept drifting back to the boy who had stood in front of him just moments ago. The way the boy's voice cracked when he spoke, the tears streaming down his face, it all felt too familiar. Something about the boy stirred emotions deep inside him, emotions he had spent years trying to bury. Judge Thomas Reed wasn't known for being soft or sentimental. In fact, most people described him as stern and unyielding. He prided himself on being fair but firm, sticking strictly to the law without letting personal feelings get in the way. But this case was different. From the moment the boy walked into the courtroom, something about him tugged at Reed's conscience. It wasn't just the boy's age or the desperation in his eyes, it was the uncanny resemblance. The shape of his jaw, the way he held himself, even the tone of his voice reminded Reed of someone he once knew. Himself. Reed leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Memories flooded his mind, memories he had tried so hard to forget. Years ago, when he was still a young lawyer climbing the ladder of success, He had briefly dated a woman from his hometown. She was kind, hardworking, and full of dreams despite her difficult circumstances. They weren't together long, but their relationship ended abruptly when she told him she was pregnant. At the time, Reed panicked. He wasn't ready for the responsibility of fatherhood. His career was taking off, and the idea of raising a child while building a name for himself felt impossible. So he made a choice, one he regretted almost immediately. He distanced himself, stopped answering her calls, and eventually moved away. Over the years, he convinced himself that it was for the best. He told himself the woman would be fine without him, that she didn't need someone like him holding her back. But now, sitting alone in his office, Reed couldn't shake the feeling that the boy in the courtroom might be the same child he had abandoned all those years ago. The thought haunted him. Was it possible? Could that angry, scared teenager really be his son? Unable to ignore the nagging doubt, Reed decided to dig deeper. He reached out to a private investigator he trusted and gave him the details, the mother's name, the timeline, everything he could remember. While waiting for answers, Reed found himself thinking about the boy constantly. He replayed the scene in the courtroom over and over in his mind, the way the boy looked at him, not with hatred but with confusion. "Do I know you?" the boy had asked, his voice trembling. Those 4 words echoed in Reed's head like a ghost. Days turned into weeks, and finally the investigator called with the results. Reed listened intently as the man explained what he had uncovered. The pieces fit perfectly. The boy was indeed his son. Reed felt the floor drop out from under him. For a moment he couldn't breathe. All these years he had imagined the child growing up happy, surrounded by love and support. Instead, here he was, a troubled teenager standing before a judge who happened to be his own father. The irony wasn't lost on Reed. The weight of his actions crashed down on him. He had failed not only as a judge, but also as a human being. Here was a boy who had grown up without guidance, without stability, and worst of all, without a father. And Reed knew deep down that he bore some responsibility for that. The realization left him paralyzed with guilt. How could he have let this happen? How could he have turned his back on his own flesh and blood? Reed wrestled with what to do next. Part of him wanted to march straight to the detention center and tell the boy the truth. But another part, the cautious, calculated side of him, knew it wasn't that simple. What good would it do to drop such a bombshell on a kid already, struggling to keep his life together? Would the boy even believe him? Or would he see it as just another excuse, another lie? For now, Reed decided to keep the truth to himself. But he couldn't stay silent forever. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the boy's face looking back at him, accusing him. "You abandoned me," those unspoken words seemed to say. Reed knew he had to find a way to make things right. But how? And where would he even begin? The days turned into weeks, and the weight on the judge's shoulders grew heavier with each passing moment. He couldn't stop thinking about the boy locked away in juvenile detention. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the teenager's face. His wide, questioning eyes, the anger mixed with sadness. The way he had looked at him like he was searching for answers. The judge knew he couldn't keep running from the truth. The boy was his son, and no matter how much he wanted to pretend otherwise, that fact wasn't going to change. But what could he do? Walking into the detention center and blurting out, "I'm your father," felt wrong. It wasn't just about telling the truth, it was about earning trust. How could he expect the boy to believe him after all these years of silence? The judge realized he needed to take small steps to show the boy he cared before dropping such a life-altering revelation on him. So, he decided to start visiting the facility, not as a judge, but as someone who genuinely wanted to help. At first, the visits were awkward. The boy didn't know why this man kept showing up sitting across from him in the cold, sterile visiting room. The judge brought books, newspapers, anything he thought might spark a conversation. But the boy barely spoke. He sat there with his arms crossed, staring at the floor, clearly annoyed by the intrusion. "Why are you here?" the boy finally asked one day, his voice sharp and defensive. "You already gave me my sentence. What more do you want?" The judge hesitated, unsure how to respond. He wanted to say, "Because I'm your father and I've been absent for your entire life." But instead, he chose his words carefully. "I'm here because I think you deserve a second chance," he said softly. "And because I believe in you." The boy scoffed, shaking his head. "You don't even know me," he shot back. "How can you believe in somebody you don't even know?" The judge didn't have an answer. He couldn't explain that he felt responsible for the boy's struggles, that every mistake the boy had made weighed on him like a personal failure. Instead, he simply nodded. "You're right," he admitted. "I don't know you, but I'd like to." That response caught the boy off guard. For a moment, he just stared at the judge, trying to figure out if the man was being sincere or if this was some kind of trick. Over time, though, those visits became less tense. They talked about books, sports, school, anything except the reason they were really there. Slowly, the boy began to open up, sharing bits and pieces of his life. He talked about growing up without a dad, about feeling invisible in a world that seemed determined to push him down. The judge listened intently, his heart breaking with every word. Meanwhile, inside his cell, the boy wrestled with his own emotions. He hated being stuck in detention, surrounded by kids who had done worse things than he had. Some of them acted tough while others cried themselves to sleep at night. The boy tried to stay strong, but it wasn't easy. He missed his mom, his siblings, the freedom to walk outside whenever he wanted. Most of all, he missed having someone who truly cared about him. Sure, his mom loved him, but she was always working, always exhausted. And his dad? Well, he didn't even know where to begin with that. During group therapy sessions, the boy often found himself talking about the judge. "He looked at me like he knew me," he told the counselor one day, his voice filled with frustration. "Like he saw something in me and still decided to lock me up anyway. Like he abandoned me too." The counselor nodded, encouraging him to dig deeper. "Do you think he reminded you of someone?" she asked gently. The boy shrugged. "Maybe," he muttered. "But it doesn't matter. Whoever he is, he doesn't care about me. If he did, he wouldn't have thrown me in here." Unbeknownst to the boy, the judge was struggling with the same feelings. Each visit left him torn between wanting to confess the truth and fearing the consequences. What if the boy rejected him? What if he hated him even more than he already did? These questions haunted the judge, keeping him awake at night. Still, he kept coming back, hoping that somehow he could make things right. One day, during one of their conversations, the boy surprised him. "Why do you keep coming here?" he asked, blunter than usual. "You're not getting paid for this, are you? So why bother?" The judge paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because I see potential in you," he said. "You've got a good heart, even if you don't realize it yet. And I think you deserve better than this place." For a split second, the boy's expression softened. Then, just as quickly, the walls went back up. "You don't get to decide what I deserve," he snapped. "You don't know anything about me." The judge sighed, knowing the boy was right. He didn't know him. Not really. Not yet. But he was determined to change that. Little by little, he hoped to build a bridge between them, to prove that he wasn't just another authority figure looking down on him. He was something more. He just didn't know how to say it yet. As the weeks passed, the boy started to notice small changes in the judge. The way he listened, really listened, when the boy spoke. The way he remembered tiny details about their previous conversations. It was almost like the man actually cared. Almost. But the boy wasn't ready to let his guard down completely. Not yet. What neither of them realized was that these quiet moments were laying the foundation for something bigger. Something neither of them could have predicted. Their bond, fragile as it was beginning to grow. And soon everything would come to light. Time moved slowly inside the detention center, but eventually the boy's 17th birthday arrived. It was a milestone that marked not only his age but also a turning point in his case. His file came up for review, and the judge overseeing juvenile cases decided it was time to reassess his progress. What no one expected, least of all the boy, was that Judge Thomas Reed would step forward and request to handle the review personally. Reed knew this moment was coming. He had spent months preparing himself for it, rehearsing what he would say and how he would say it. But as the day approached, his nerves got the better of him. He couldn't stop thinking about the boy's piercing gaze, the way he had looked at him during their last meeting. There was anger there, yes, but also pain. A raw, unfiltered pain that cut straight through Reed's defenses. He knew he couldn't keep hiding behind his robe or his title. This time, he had to face the truth head-on. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation when the hearing began. The boy shuffled in wearing an oversized orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed, in front of him. His eyes darted around the room, taking in the familiar faces, the bailiffs, the lawyers, the clerk typing away on her keyboard. And then his gaze landed on the judge. Reed sat tall in his chair, his expression unreadable. For a moment, their eyes locked, and the air between them crackled with tension. "Your Honor," the boy's lawyer began, breaking the silence. "We're here today to discuss the defendant's rehabilitation efforts and potential release." Reed nodded, flipping through the papers in front of him. He listened as the lawyer outlined the boy's accomplishments during his time in detention. Completing educational programs, participating in group therapy, even earning praise from counselors for his improved behavior. But none of that mattered to Reed. Not really. All he could focus on was the boy standing before him, older now, angrier, but still carrying that same spark of defiance he'd seen the first day they met. When it was the boy's turn to speak, he hesitated. His lawyer nudged him gently, urging him to step forward. Slowly, reluctantly, the boy approached the microphone. At first, his voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "I've done my best to change," he said, glancing down at his feet. "I know, I messed up and I'm sorry for that, but I don't want to waste my life anymore." He paused, lifting his head to look directly at the judge. His voice grew stronger, more confident. "You don't know what it's like to grow up without anybody," he continued, his words laced with emotion. "To have dreams bigger than your circumstances but no way to reach them. And then when you finally get caught, the person supposed to give you a second chance looks at you like they already gave up." The room fell silent. Every eye turned toward Reed, waiting for his response. The boy took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Then, in a voice so soft it was almost a whisper, he added, "You abandoned me. You're supposed to protect kids like me, but you let me rot in here." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats, others leaned forward, eager to see how the judge would react. Reed froze, his pen slipping from his fingers and clattering onto the desk. He felt exposed, stripped bare in front of everyone. The boy's words hit him like a punch to the gut, leaving him breathless. For a long moment, Reed didn't move. He stared at the boy, his mind racing. He wanted to explain, to tell him everything, that he was his father, that he hadn't known about him until recently, that he regretted every missed opportunity to be part of his life. But the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he simply nodded, his jaw tightening as he fought back tears. "I hear you," Reed said finally, his voice hoarse. "And I promise you, I'll do everything I can to make sure you get the second chance you deserve." The boy blinked, clearly caught off guard by the judge's response. He didn't know what to say, so he just stood there, staring at the man who seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. After a brief deliberation, Reed announced his decision. The boy would be released early into a supervised program designed to help young offenders transition back into society. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, some approving, others skeptical. But the boy barely heard any of it. His mind was spinning, replaying the judge's words over and over again. As the bailiff led him out of the courtroom, the boy glanced back at Reed one last time. Their eyes met, and for a split second, something passed between them. Something neither of them could quite put into words. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a start. Later that evening, Reed sat alone in his office, staring at the empty chair across from his desk. He replayed the scene in his mind, reliving every word the boy had said. "You abandoned me." Those 3 words echoed in his head like a haunting melody. He knew he couldn't undo the past, but he also knew he couldn't keep running from it. Tomorrow, he decided, he would take the first real step toward making things right. The days following the courtroom confrontation were a blur for both the boy and the judge. The boy had been released into a supervised rehabilitation program, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something about the judge was different. There was a heaviness in the man's eyes, a vulnerability that didn't match the stern figure he'd seen before. It gnawed at him, leaving him restless and confused. For the judge, every waking moment was consumed by guilt and determination. He knew the time had come to face the truth, not just with himself, but with the boy. Keeping the secret any longer felt like a betrayal, not only of the boy, but of his own humanity. So after much deliberation, Reed requested a private meeting with the boy under the pretense of discussing his progress in the rehabilitation program. The meeting took place in a small, windowless room at the detention center's transition facility. It was sparse, with only a table and 2 chairs. The boy walked in reluctantly, his arms crossed and his jaw tight. He still didn't trust the judge, no matter how many times the man had shown up or how sincere he seemed. Reed sat across from him, his hands clasped tightly together. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched out, heavy and charged with unspoken words. Finally, Reed broke it. "I need to tell you something," he began, his voice low and steady. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." The boy raised an eyebrow, suspicion flickering across his face. "What is it?" he asked, his tone guarded. Reed hesitated, searching for the right words. This wasn't just any conversation. It was a confession, a plea for forgiveness, and possibly the most important moment of his life. "Do you remember what you said to me in court?" he asked gently. "About feeling abandoned?" The boy stiffened, his defenses rising instantly. "Yeah," he replied sharply. "So what? You gonna tell me I'm wrong?" "No," Reed said quickly, shaking his head. "You're not wrong. In fact, you're more right than you know." He paused, taking a deep breath. "The reason I look at you the way I do, the reason I feel like I know you, is because you're my son." The room seemed to freeze. The boy stared at him, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to anger. "What are you talking about?" he demanded, his voice rising. "You think this is some kind of joke? You don't get to waltz in here and say stuff like that." "I'm not joking," Reed insisted, his voice trembling now. "Your mother, she and I, we were together once a long time ago, before you were born. But when she told me she was pregnant, I panicked. I wasn't ready to be a father. I thought I could build a career, make something of myself first, so I left. I abandoned her, and I abandoned you." The boy's chest rose and fell rapidly as he processed the words. His mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of his childhood, the unanswered questions about his father. "You're lying," he said finally, though his voice lacked conviction. "If you really cared, you would have come back. You wouldn't have waited until now." "You're right," Reed admitted, his eyes filling with tears. "I should have come back. I should have been there for you, for birthdays, for school plays, for everything. But I didn't, and I can't change that. All I can do is try to make it right starting today." The boy looked away, his fists clenched. He wanted to believe the man sitting across from him, but years of pain and abandonment made it hard to trust anyone, let alone a judge who had sentenced him to detention. "Why should I even care?" he muttered bitterly. "You weren't there when I needed you. Why should I let you in now?" Reed nodded, understanding the weight of the boy's anger. "You don't have to forgive me," he said softly. "And you don't have to let me in, but I want you to know that I'm here if you ever decide to give me a chance. I'll spend the rest of my life making up for what I did, or at least trying to." They sat in silence for a while, the tension between them palpable. The boy wrestled with conflicting emotions: anger at being abandoned, curiosity about the man claiming to be his father, and a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different this time. Over the next few weeks, Reed kept his promise. He visited regularly, bringing books, offering advice, and simply listening when the boy needed to vent. At first, their interactions were strained, with the boy keeping his guard up and Reed walking on eggshells. But slowly, cracks began to form in the walls the boy had built around himself. Small gestures, a genuine compliment, a shared laugh, a story about Reed's own struggles as a young man, started to chip away at the mistrust. One day, during a particularly heated argument, the boy exploded. "You think showing up now fixes everything?" he shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. "You missed my whole life. You don't get to just barge in and act like you care." Reed didn't flinch. "You're absolutely right," he said calmly. "I missed your whole life, and nothing I do will ever change that. But I'm here now and I'm not going anywhere. Whether you like it or not, I'm your father, and I love you." The boy froze, stunned by the word he'd never heard directed at him before. Love. It sounded foreign, almost too big to comprehend. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Then, without warning, tears spilled down his cheeks. He turned away, embarrassed, but Reed reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry," Reed whispered. "For everything." The boy didn't respond right away. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, struggling to compose himself. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "I still hate you sometimes," he admitted. "But I want to believe you. I want to believe you're different." "That's all I ask," Reed said, his own voice thick with emotion. "Just give me a chance. That's all I need." From that day forward, their relationship began to shift. It wasn't perfect. They still argued, still struggled to understand each other. But they were building something new, something fragile yet hopeful. Reed used his influence to secure the boy a spot in a vocational training program, helping him gain skills that could lead to a better future. In return, the boy started opening up, sharing pieces of his life and dreams he had never dared to voice before. As months passed, the boy began to see glimpses of the man behind the robe. He saw Reed's flaws, his regrets, and his determination to make amends. And though forgiveness didn't come easily, it began to take root, one hesitant step at a time. Years passed, and life began to take on a rhythm neither the boy nor the judge could have predicted. The vocational training program Reed had arranged turned out to be more than just a lifeline. It became a turning point. At first, the boy resisted. He didn't see the point of learning new skills when he felt like the world had already written him off. But slowly, something shifted. Maybe it was the patience of his instructors, or maybe it was the quiet determination of the man who kept showing up to check on him. But for the first time in his life, he started believing he might actually have a future worth fighting for. He threw himself into the program, working long hours and soaking up every lesson like a sponge. It wasn't easy. There were days when frustration nearly overwhelmed him, when old doubts crept back in and whispered that he'd never amount to anything. But whenever those thoughts surfaced, he remembered the judge's words. "I believe in you." Those simple words became an anchor, pulling him back from the edge whenever he felt like giving up. By the time graduation day arrived, the boy had transformed. He walked across the stage with his head held high, clutching a certificate that proved he was capable of more than anyone, including himself, had ever imagined. His classmates cheered, some patting him on the back as he returned to his seat. But amidst the celebration, his eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on one familiar face. There, sitting near the front row, was the judge. For once, he wasn't wearing his black robe. Instead, he looked like any other proud parent, clapping louder than anyone else. After the ceremony, the boy found Reed waiting outside. "You did it," Reed said, his voice filled with pride. "I'm so proud of you." The boy hesitated, unsure how to respond. Over the past few years, their relationship had grown stronger, but moments like this still felt surreal. "Thanks," he muttered finally, scratching the back of his neck. "I couldn't have done it without your help." Reed shook his head. "This was all you," he insisted. "I just opened the door. You're the one who walked through it." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, surprising even himself, the boy extended his hand. Reed reached out to shake it, only to find himself pulled into a hug instead. It was awkward at first, the kind of embrace two people share when they're still figuring each other out. But it quickly softened into something real, something meaningful. Life after graduation wasn't perfect. There were challenges, setbacks, and moments when the weight of the past threatened to pull the boy under. But now, he had tools to deal with them. He worked hard, taking odd jobs here and there, while building connections in the trade he had learned. Slowly, he began to carve out a life for himself, a life that didn't revolve around survival but possibility. Reed stayed involved, not because he felt obligated, but because he genuinely wanted to. Their bond deepened with each passing month. They went fishing together on weekends, shared meals at Reed's house, and talked about everything under the sun. Sometimes the boy brought up painful memories, the loneliness of growing up without a father, the anger he had carried for so long. Other times, Reed opened up about his own struggles, sharing stories about mistakes he had made and lessons he had learned along the way. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, the boy turned to Reed and said, "You know, I used to hate you, like really hate you." Reed chuckled softly. "I know," he replied, "and you had every right to. But now," the boy paused, searching for the right words, "now I don't hate you anymore. Not completely anyway. I still get mad sometimes thinking about all the years we missed, but I also see how hard you're trying. And I guess that counts for something." "It means everything," Reed said quietly. "Thank you for giving me a chance." They sat in silence for a while, letting the cool breeze wash over them. In that moment, neither of them needed to say anything more. They both knew how far they had come and how much farther they still had to go. Years later, the boy, now a young man, stood in front of a group of teenagers at a community center. He had been invited to speak about his journey, to share his story with kids who were facing similar struggles. As he looked out at the sea of faces, some hopeful, others defiant, he thought back to his own childhood, to the streets that had shaped him, the mistakes that had defined him, and the man who had refused to give up on him. "I won't lie to y'all," he began, his voice steady. "Life ain't easy. It'll knock you down, make you feel like you don't matter. But here's the thing, you do matter, every single one of you. And no matter where you come from or what you've done, it's never too late to change. Trust me, I know." As he spoke, he caught sight of Reed sitting in the back of the room, smiling proudly. Their eyes met briefly, and the young man gave a small nod. It was a silent acknowledgement, a reminder of how far they had come together. When the talk ended, several kids approached him asking questions and thanking him for his words. One boy lingered behind, looking hesitant. "Do you think I can really change?" he asked quietly. The young man knelt down so they were eye level. "Yeah, I do," he said firmly. "But it starts with believing in yourself, and finding someone who believes in you too." As he walked out of the center that night, he spotted Reed waiting by the car. "How'd it go?" Reed asked. "It went good," the young man replied, grinning. "Real good." They drove home in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from knowing you've built something strong enough to withstand anything. Neither of them knew what the future held, but for the first time they weren't afraid of it. Together they had proven that even broken bonds could be mended, that forgiveness was possible, and that hope could grow in the unlikeliest places. And, as they pulled into the driveway, the young man realized something. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was thriving, and he owed it all to the man who had once abandoned him, but had ultimately chosen to stay.